¡Ahí viene la migra!
Trucha con la migra, dice Dr. Loco en the Rockin' Jalapeño Band. Ese es Carlos Spector, abogado de migración, trayéndole su programa Trucha Time cada lunes, miércoles y viernes, hablando con la comunidad, promoviendo papeles para los que no tienen o a las personas que se las van a revocar, el DACA. Hemos iniciado un programa aquí en Radio Cama hasta el fin de enero para darles a conocer de los cambios en las leyes, los cambios que nos trae trompetas y plan B. ¿Qué van a hacer si sus permisos de trabajo son revocados? Estamos aquí hoy, este miércoles, con 3 invitados. Michael Lechuga, un profesor en Communications Department, is a lecturer in the Communications Department. David Gamez, a student majoring in electrical engineering at Community College, and Senaida Navar, a teaching assistant at the English department. David and Senaida are both DACA recipients, and we will be talking to them about their perspectives, their hopes, their fears, and more importantly, their activity. What is it that we as a community are going to do to organize the DACA recipients, their families, and the community at large to bring about the type of social change and legal change that we need for our communities. And to that end, let's begin with la bienvenida a todos. Primeramente vamos a hablar con Senaida Navar, una señorita muy inteligente, very smart young lady that I had the pleasure of meeting at Congressman O'Rourke's town hall meeting. And she's a teaching assistant in she's a graduate in the English department and has quite a bit to say about the situation of the DACA recipients, having or who is currently one. Good, welcome, Senaida.
Well, thank you for having me. You know, when DACA first came about, it was really like a dream come true for a lot of us, for decades, really, because I came when I was 2 years old. We had been living in the shadows. There was this sense of Americanness to my identity, but at the same time, it was really hidden because we weren't publicly acknowledged as Americans. But at the same time, we weren't truly Mexicans either, because our ties to the country really were only reinforced through our parents and their experiences. So it was a very difficult time, you know, feeling like you were part of a country while the country didn't accept you. So when DACA first came about, it felt really amazing because it really felt like you were finally part of the society. Like there were steps being taken to make you part of that society. So for me, it really, really helped me financially, yes, and that was a really big part of it because it really allowed me to get my bachelor's and to continue getting my master's. But it was also about my identity. You know, it was really this giant relief finally being able to step out of the shadows and feel like you were actually contributing more to society and being part of it. So, you know, now with this threat of getting DACA removed, it's piling up more on these uncertainties, whereas before it was this idea of I have to renew it every 2 years, hopefully I'll get it done in time so I can keep my job. Now it's this complete uncertainty of, am I going to be forced back into the shadows? Is that what's going to happen? or are they going to use my information and they're going to deport me automatically? And, it's a very stressful situation, which is why I feel that as a community of dreamers, we really need to come together. Now is really the time to really band together and perhaps form kind of a coalition amongst ourselves to really help each other. Not just on the legal aspects, but also as a support system, because I feel that that is what we're really going to be needing at this moment of crisis. It's going to be having other individuals who understand our situation, our problems, and really help each other through these difficult times.
Now, I think I salute you and David's presence in this program and in other forums, because I think it's important to lead by example, as you and David are doing by speaking out. A lot of people who did come out of the shadows have a culture of living in the shadows. Vienes sin papeles. Your parents tell you, no digas nada, menso. You don't go around forming clubs in high school or grade school. And so my question to you is, how old were you when you came to the United States? Who did you come with, and when did you first find out you didn't have papers?
I came when I was 2 years old, and I came with my parents. And
from where?
From Durango, Mexico. So we were really in a rural area. I can't precisely pinpoint a moment when I realized I didn't have papers. It was just something that was always in the back of my mind. I would sit with my parents, and they would talk among themselves and other family members, and they would tell stories of how other children or other families had been deported. And so I kind of already had this awareness that I fell in that group. So for as long as I can remember, it's always been this very secretive, family secret where you don't talk about it. You're very careful about the friends you make. What do you tell these friends? How much information do you allow them to know about you? So it really, really turned me into a very private person because of that uncertainty that if something were to go wrong, if you got into a fight, there was a possibility that they could go tell on you. So really, for me, it wasn't a specific moment. I've always just really had this consciousness about me my entire life.
So your parents' fear was transmitted to you?
Yeah.
Without even being verbalized. And I think that's a very common experience. What grade school did you go to?
I actually went to two. I went to Red Sands Elementary. So I actually started school here, which is really part of why I identify as American so much. And then I also went to Montana Vista Elementary.
And then which high school?
Mountain View High School.
And you graduated when?
2010. From there, I actually graduated top 10 in my class. I was an officer in all types of clubs. I was captain of the cross-country team. I was very heavily involved in high school. And part of the reason for that was that I understood if I wanted to go to college, the only way I would be able to afford it was through scholarships, because I knew there wasn't any financial aid for myself.
Now, was there ever a point in time where not having papers in high school impeded going to a track meet or having to go through Sierra Blanca or Deming?
Yeah, it was really interesting because that was always one of my concerns, especially when you get to high school where you really start making these out-of-town trips. I really had that fear. However, my coach was really, really understanding about that. And since he had been my sister's coach as well, he understood our situation. So he always made sure to tell us that it was okay, that because we were a school-sponsored team, that wasn't going to be an issue. So even with that, the couple of times that we did pass through the checkpoints, there's still that fear in you. So even with my coach reassuring us that it wasn't going to be an issue because, my sisters had done it before, he still told us it wasn't going to be an issue. But at that moment, there was still that fear, that what if. So it wasn't necessarily this, I'm not going to be able to go. It was just that fear of, what if this happens? What if they actually stop us? So, even being reassured, that fear stays with you.
How many other siblings do you have?
I actually have 4 sisters, and my youngest sister is actually a U.S. citizen because when my parents came here, my mom was actually pregnant, And the moment we set foot here, 2 weeks from that moment, my little sister was born.
Okay, and so your other two sisters are also DACA recipients.
Well, my other three sisters, one of them actually got her citizenship through her husband. So I only actually have two of them who are also DACA recipients.
577-0750-577-0750, Radio Cama, Trucha Time. We're on Facebook live streaming. If you have a question or want to contribute, you can call us at 577-0750. One quick legal point related to one's legal cultural identity that I'd like to make before introducing our next guest, David, and also interrogating him about his personal life, his fears, and his hopes, is the fact that one of the worst things under immigration law that anybody can ever do is false claim to citizenship. And we can't say that enough, because who is probably more guilty of that, because they feel in their bones they're Americans, are DACA kids who going through the checkpoint, they don't have paper, or se le olvidó el permiso de trabajo, le preguntan citizenship, and she says citizen. Where'd you go to school? Where'd you go? They let you through. But if you are ever caught, or on any application you ever make in the future, have you ever made a false claim to citizenship? That question is designed to say, do you understand you'll never fix your papers? It's really, you ain't gonna get no papers if you say yes. It's one of the few grounds of inadmissibility that has no waivers. And so my concern many times has been that, or you're in high school and you go have a couple at the Kentucky Club and you come back borrachos and you say citizenship. Or in the back of the car, everybody says citizen. And I've had DACA kids who went on to get married, and then they said that very innocently. Oh yeah, one time, when I have one in particular, which is very, very sad. A girl in track was going to a track meet through Sierra Blanca, and Border Patrol agent puts his head in the bus and says, "Everybody's a citizen," and everyone screams yes. And she told that incident to the adjuster, the immigration adjuster, at her adjustment interview for residency. Oh yeah, one time, y se la negaron. It's up on appeal, and there is no real solution to that. So I think there's a there's a lesson in that. Let's turn to David Gamez. He's a 20-year-old native and casi citizen of El Paso. Bienvenido, David.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity to let us speak out and fight for our rights, fight for what is right.
Have you spoken out before today?
Yes, I was at the town hall meeting with Congressman Beto O'Rourke, and I gave a speech there, and he actually took my case down in the Florian C-SPAN, and it was really nice. Big thank you to him for fighting for this cause. It is people like him who keep the dream alive.
Now, was that the first time you spoke out?
Ever since the program came out, I have been going to trips to places like Austin, Texas, where we did a demonstration back in 2013, and we tried to talk to our representatives at the House, and I actually got to speak with Marisa Rodriguez.
That's great. With what organization?
It was with the Border Network
for
Human Rights.
Great, they're doing great. Great work. Now, David, let's talk a little about you, because I think that, as I indicated earlier, what Senaida has to say and what you have to say is something that everybody who's in your shoes understands. Only different reaction to same situations in terms of coming to a country and living in the shadows for so many years, and then all of a sudden you're out of them, and now possibly you're going back under, or at least that's what they want you to do. How old were you when you came to the U.S., and where did you come from?
So I was 10 years old. We were living in Cancun, Quintana Roo, and Category 5 hurricane passed through, and it destroyed our home. We lost everything. I'm an only child. My mother is a single mother. My father walked out on us, and we were left with no other option but to come here with some family. and we've been here ever since. I am now fully integrated into the American society and the way of life.
Okay, and where were you born? Where did you grow up?
I was born in Mexico City. I lived there for about 7 years, and I lived 2 in Cancun.
And what took your mom to Cancun?
She was a massage therapist, so we were out there for the tourist environment.
And what grade school did you go to?
I came here to Lamar Elementary in 4th grade, and then I moved on to Wiggs and finished off my high school career at El Paso High.
When was the first time you noticed or felt that there was something special about your status, not having papers?
Just like my peers, Senaida said earlier, there's really no point exactly where you realize. It's just always in the back of your mind ever since you set foot. There's just a tension that is always persistent. You know, there's just something in the air that keeps you always like in a sense of alert.
Now, there wasn't any aha moment.
I mean, there was obviously whenever I was offered to go out of town and I was denied, and I always wondered why, you know. And
Who denied?
Obviously my mom, she's like, you can't go on this school trip because, you know, sadly,
No tienes papeles. She
no
would tell-
tienes papeles, exacto.
I said, now, in terms of there's this interesting dynamic within nuestra comunidad entre lo que yo digo, los mojados, los húmedos y los secados, donde hay esa contradicción cultural, you know, because once you come here and you speak English, with or without paper, back home in Mexico, en Juárez, ya eres pocho.
Exactly.
You know, o hasta que se hace residente, ya eres pocho. So pocho, I think, is a much more, it's not a derogatory term sometimes. It can be, but pocho is more a question of legal identity as well as cultural. And some people without papers don't speak a word of Spanish.
Exactly.
And some people who are citizens don't want to speak a word of Spanish or speak any English. And so, did you ever notice any tension in school when you were growing up? For example, if someone would say to one of the kids would say something was, nomás es un mojado.
Yeah.
How did that make you feel, and was that common, or did you want to say something?
I mean, obviously, you always want to keep quiet. It's not a thing that you're like bragging about. But I mean, I did get a little bit of prejudice when I didn't know any English here, and well, there was one time where I was part of a church group, and they did go on a trip, and well, we let them know the situation, and all of a sudden, I just felt like a prejudice coming from them. They backed off right away, and you know, it just felt really bad, really harsh.
Now, have either one of you noticed any organizing going on in the high schools for the DACA kids?
Well, we have heard of, you know, certain teachers coming together, but more kind of like in southern New Mexico and really trying to organize students there. But as far as, you know, my high school or any high schools around that area, I have yet to hear anything about that.
Okay. Let me begin a conversation and dealing with some of the proposals that are pending for DACA, for DACA recipients, and then we'll bring in Michael Lechuga, a lecturer at the Communications Department at UTEP. Y disculpa, pero estoy medio ronco hoy. There is a bill. The question becomes, what happens January 20th when Trompeta repeals the executive action, which we all anticipate will be done within the first day or second, my opinion. Your status as a DACA recipient, no more deferral of status or of removal. But what happens to your work permit? You know, what happens if it's pending till 2018 because you just got it? Is that going to revoke work authorization as well, or are they going to give us a grace period? he's starting, they say, to soften up. But I think we need to hear and listen to Trump. He's not playing around. His anti-immigrant xenophobia, his hatred, especially of Mexicans, I think is real and intentional in terms of giving something to his base that he's broken other promises. This one he will not break. And so that becomes that question. Now, we had last, I think on Monday, a representative from the Texas Civil Rights Project in Laredo, and they're looking for kids who are DACA recipients who have work authorization and have tried to get their driver's license renewed. And DPS, Department of Public Safety, is denying it on the basis that this program is probably going out. And so it's like a divorce. You're married until you're divorced. It's like life. You're alive until you're dead. Once it's revoked, then you can't renew it. But they're going out of their way to deny it from the state perspective before it's even revoked. And so they're doing it now. And so if anybody out there is listening to us, or you guys know people who are having had that problem, then we can put you in contact with them. The other thing that happened when you got your employment authorization, and I'm curious with you guys if it happened to you, is when you went to get your your driver's license for the first time, what happened? Did they ask you for any proof that you lived here?
Oh yeah, they asked for so many papers. I had to go back a couple of times because every time I would go, they would tell me, "Oh, well, you're missing this document," which was really ironic because then I went again and they were like, "Oh, you just needed this one," which was the one I had brought originally. So it seemed to be a lot of misinformation even within the department itself, that they weren't really sure even what to require of you, because I would bring all these documents and they were like, "Oh, well, you still need this other one," and then, "Oh, you don't actually need that one." So it was a lot of misinformation. I was getting different answers from different people.
Well, that's the question. I mean, that's really one of the things that was happening, that there were hurdles to get the license at the beginning, and now that we're at the end of it, they're doing it again. And it kind of reminds me of the voting rights movement in ACT, where they had all these hurdles. You had to pay a poll tax. You had to be able to recite the Bible upside down. I mean, all these silly requirements that was political in a policy. But here it just seemed there was an absolute institutionalized apathy. However you can deny it, go ahead and do it. And so those are the things that we're looking for. We're looking for those type of cases now too. Now, there is a bill that will be introduced or moved by Senator Graham and Durbin called the Bridge Act. And I don't think the chances are very good, but the Bridge Act was vetted December 9th of this year, and they're trying to make that one of the first bills, immigration bills, not within a comprehensive packet, which some people don't like, but to deal with the 3-year extension and give you a provisional status for 3 years, and to include those DACAs or those people who didn't apply before, and maybe move the date back to like the age of 14. And so that's something that maybe we can look for. But again, if it's revoked and that bill is introduced, how long is it going to take? It still has to go to the whole House and then the Senate, the House and the Senate. And actually, it's the Senate first who has a greater chance of passing, then the House, then the subcommittee, and then sign. That could be a year. Even the good news is bad news, okay? And so there's also the movement that Luis Gutierrez, congressman, has begun, and Congressman O'Rourke has adopted, to pardon those DACA recipients. How do you guys feel about being pardoned?
I feel like that is definitely the way to go, because it was not our choice to be brought here. We didn't have a saying in that decision. We were children, And now that we have been educated here, we are now an investment to the nation, and the nation needs to take advantage of us being here and us being already educated for so many years, because we are highly motivated to go on to bigger things and keep getting a higher education and opening businesses and being engineers, doctors, lawyers. We are aiming high. That's why DACA is here to help students, to help people who are aiming high and striving for excellence and success.
What do you think?
I completely agree with that sentiment. There's something about the word pardon that's troubling. It's saying that I need to ask for forgiveness for something that I didn't willingly do. And for me, that's probably a reflective of how the country views our status. They think that in a lot of ways we have to apologize. And for me, that's troubling, because I'm here and I'm thinking, what exactly do I have to apologize for? What am I asking for forgiveness of? And that's what really troubles me, that even if I were to ask for forgiveness, would I have to be continuing to pay that debt for the rest of my life? And would I still be considered this sub-citizen even after that? Would there even actually be any forgiveness for something I didn't really do? Would anything in terms of how society views us change at all?
Right, and even though the argument, and Obama said he's not going to do it, is that he has the constitutional authority to pardon offenses, all types of offenses, criminal offenses, civil offenses, and entering unlawfully or staying here beyond the visa is an offense. It's a civil offense, and the logic was to pardon that, and at least it would make it very difficult for them to try to deport you, because they have to allege when you go to court in what's called the notice to appear, the indictment, why are we trying to deport you? Because you entered without papers. But if you're pardoned for that, they can't. And so then you're back to limbo. I mean that's the problem. And it's kind of like, I think many of us, and maybe even including myself, is kind of like, pues algo es algo. For at least from a very technical perspective as an attorney, it would be easier to defend you. And then, ¿y qué? At least that's off your back. Mm-hmm. But that's where we're at, in terms of begging for crumbs. Let's go for our first commercial break, and we'll come right back.
Imagínese, cruzando una calle ocupada y con mucho tráfico, en contra de la luz del semáforo. ¡Idiota! Y encima de todo, con los ojos vendados.
¿Está usted loco?
¿Usted haría esto? Probablemente no lo haría. Es un riesgo que obviamente no vale la pena correr. Pero algunos riesgos no son tan obvios, pero pueden ser igualmente mortales, tales como el riesgo de padecer diabetes tipo 2. Si usted tiene sobrepeso o más de 45 años de edad, tome el examen de riesgo de la diabetes. Es gratis y toma menos de 1 minuto. Llame al 1-800-DIABETES o visite portufamilia.org/tome el examen, ya que la diabetes tipo 2 es un riesgo que usted no debe correr. Tome el examen de riesgo de la diabetes y detenga la diabetes antes de que lo detenga usted. Un mensaje de la Asociación Americana de la Diabetes.
Cuando la noticia de dos países se entrelazan, se requiere un análisis profundo, certero, profesional, a fondo, versátil de quien entiende la dinámica de la frontera.
Texas tiene 17 votos electorales, es importante, es grande también. California tiene como unos 22, también es muy importante. Ohio es uno de los importantes.
Expresión fronteriza, con la opinión fresca, veraz y atinada de Leonardo Sala y Andía. Expresión fronteriza, de lunes a viernes, de 9 a 10 de la mañana por 7:50 AM.
Muchas veces realizamos nuestra rutina diaria, pero un sinfín de distracciones empañan nuestra mirada. Incontables víctimas de trata de personas caminan junto a nosotros, invisibles. Es tiempo de abrir los ojos. Blue Campaign brinda una voz unificada para quienes trabajan combatiendo el crimen atroz de la trata de personas. ya sea trabajo forzado, servidumbre o explotación sexual. Descubre qué puedes hacer en dhs.gov/Blue Campaign.
¡Trucha! ¡Ahí viene la migra!
Todos los lunes, miércoles y viernes a las 11 de la mañana, escucha el programa Trucha Time, conducido por el licenciado especialista en casos de inmigración, Carlos Spector. Conozca los cambios que hará Trump y los derechos que usted y su familia tienen. Y hay que estar preparado. Recuerde, lunes, miércoles y viernes a las 11 de la mañana.
Soy el abogado Carlos Spector. Los espero para darles información que necesitan cuando llegue Trump. Es Trucha Time. Preparados, no escamados.
Cuando necesite exámenes de rayos X, ultrasonidos, mamografía, tomografía computada y medicina nuclear a costos mucho menores que en El Paso, visite Centro Radiológico en Ciudad Juárez. En Centro Radiológico contamos con los equipos más avanzados para ofrecerle los mismos servicios radiológicos que en El Paso a costos menores. En Centro Radiológico contamos con estudios de cardiología. En Centro Radiológico, el Departamento de Cardiología es el mejor equipado en todo el estado. Contamos con estudios de ecocardiografía Doppler color, sistemas de monitoreo de presión arterial para 24 horas de manera ambulatoria, pruebas de esfuerzo para determinar la capacidad del corazón, cateterismo cardíaco diagnóstico y terapéutico. Llámenos para informes a Centro Radiológico en Ciudad Juárez. Teléfono 616-1505, ubicados en Avenida López Mateos 890 Sur. Centro Radiológico en Ciudad Juárez, respaldando su buena salud.
Univisión América, Cama 750 AM, te trae lo mejor de la comunidad y noticias locales con Entérate El Paso. Ahora de lunes a viernes de 10 a 11 de la mañana. Te esperamos en Univisión América, Cama 750 AM, con las noticias más recientes, lo mejor en deportes, reporte de puentes, eventos en tu comunidad, oportunidades de trabajo y muchos otros servicios de tu interés. Entérate El Paso, lunes a viernes a las 10 de la mañana por Univisión América, Cama 750 AM.
Keep this movement going, keep this movement rolling, in spite of the difficulties, and we're going to have a few more difficulties. Keep climbing, keep moving. If you can't fly, run. If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. But by all means, keep moving.
By all means, keep moving. We're going to have some difficulties ahead of us, and that's why Trucha Time is appropriate. Hay que ser trucha, hay que saber lo que está pasando. You have to be involved in your community. You have to understand your community, and that's why we have three distinguished guests today with us. We've spoken to David Gamez, 20-year electrical engineering student, quite a leader in our community, DACA recipient, and also Senaida Navar, a graduate student in the English department and a teaching assistant. I had the opportunity to hear her speak very brilliantly at Congressman O'Rourke's town hall meeting, and I also had the pleasure of hearing Michael Lechuga, a lecturer at the UTEP Communications Department, give a very impassioned speech at Congressman O'Rourke's town hall meeting. And without further ado, I bring into the discussion Michael Lechuga. Bienvenido, Michael.
Muchas gracias. Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little about yourself. Where are you from?
Lifelong El Pasoan. I
All
grew
right.
up here in El Paso, born and raised. I've had the opportunity to travel a little bit and do some studying, and just recently.
Where'd you go to high school?
Franklin High School.
Okay.
On the west side, too.
And you're teaching at UTEP in the communications department. Specifically, what do you teach? What do you do there?
I teach public speaking. I'm also teaching, rhetoric, interpersonal communication, and some other classes.
Oh, we got a good coach, un revoltoso.
Sí, necesito. Aquí estoy.
Okay. And I understand one of the things that we've been trying to do with this DACA program, essentially, is to show the breadth and depth of our community, of these kids without papers, but with much spirit and heart and ganas. And they just don't pop out of the sky. They come with families, some with papers, others without papers, some orphaned, others with both parents. And every story is different, and we're generally talking and listening to the perspective of the DACA recipient. We've had mothers come on, and now we have the great pleasure of having you on to give us your perspective of what it is to be a citizen and to have several family members who are DACA recipients and have lived for a while under the shadows.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, first of all, we do take for granted. We were sort of speaking at the break how much people who were born here in the United States, even just living in El Paso, take for granted that we have that passport. We have the ability to easily cross the border when we please, to go have a couple drinks, to have lunch in Juarez, and then easily return back. For the most part, though, those individuals who are on DACA or even before receiving DACA were stuck. You couldn't go past Sierra Blanca, or you couldn't go past Las Cruces, like you mentioned, and I think we take that for granted. Secondly, I think it's awful how our family members are being used as pawns in this political game. We see that there's this sort of general apathy amongst the citizenship of what is happening in our community. How many people didn't go vote during this election, and when we see the numbers, it's kind of sad to see that our family members, those DACA recipients, those dreamers, are the ones left to bear the burden of our apathy. So I think for me and in my family, we are active in trying to fight for what we know is right, and that's citizenship for dreamers.
Yeah, it's as a practicing immigration attorney for over 25 years, one of the things that became very clear to me was the mixed status nature of our community, that almost everybody on the border has someone in the family, maybe your brother, maybe a parent, maybe un primo hermano, una tía, someone without papers. There's that consciousness that not all of us have papers. And I've seen where that has created divisions and problems within families. I had a case, or have a case, of two brothers that came over at the same time, or one came over first with her mom like a year before, and then he came later. And the one that came first qualified for DACA, and the second one didn't. And they're pretty much the same age, and the one with DACA is finishing college, and the other one dropped out of high school. And they're both very sharp, but it really does speak to a study in motion as to the impact that legal status has, clearly, in terms of hopes. I mean, if you can't dream, then there is no hope. And I think it's appropriately called the Dream Act and the Dreamers. They're trying to convert our dreams into a nightmare. And I think with the collective actions and public speaking and involvement of members of this discussion, I think we can move forward. And I think there is an important role in support groups. You didn't call it that, but I think it is like a support group to be able to. Sometimes when you have the same problem that the group has, you don't even have to talk about it. Lo entienden. And so there's this collective trauma. I do a lot of Mexican asylum work with just horrible crimes in front of the kids that they survive. Nobody's talking to them at school. This is not a type of problem that you guys could raise at the school, right? And go to say, do you ever go to the nurse and say, oiga, nurse, no puedo dormir porque estoy pensando que se van a llevar a mi jefe. It doesn't even occur to you that or to the teachers, that the depression and the apathy may just be outright depression. It's just people don't understand. And of course, I've learned to begin to understand it after 20 years when you go to school and your father goes to the fields or a construction job, and you don't know if he's coming back. And he doesn't know if he's coming back. And so these are really heart-rending stories. But getting back to you, Michael, in terms of my understanding is that you've also have an interest in immigration policy and studies.
Right.
What areas?
My PhD is in communication and rhetoric, and so I spent a lot of my time researching the language that we use to describe immigration, both legally and socially. And I also take an interest in understanding the relationship between the U.S. military and border security, how much of an industry really we're supporting by continuing to deport and detain undocumented migrants. One of the things that I think is important, and one of the things that I brought up at the town hall meeting was just the fact that the language that we use has a troubling effect. We talk about traumatized communities, and I think that we can pretty easily consider our undocumented migrants today a traumatized community who many struggle to find a home here. As in David's story, his family literally experienced a traumatic event, were displaced, and are now dealing with the further traumatization of a potential administration that's demonizing or criminalizing them. So simply by changing the language that we use to describe one another. For example, the state of California and Governor Jerry Brown recently struck the term illegal alien and illegal immigrant from all state congressional records. And I think we could follow suit as a country to do that. And by changing those terms, simply by removing that label, we will seek further understanding as opposed to judgment on individuals in our community who have, like Senaida said, have done nothing wrong and who should not be asking for forgiveness.
You know, you mentioned something that's been on my mind, and qué bueno que estás aquí, como dicen, tomando ventaja del momento. General Kelly has been named the head of the Department of Homeland Security. The Department of Homeland Security is USCIS, Las Visas, ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement, which is Interior Enforcement, and CBP, Customs and Border Protection. They're all within the Department of Homeland Security. The guy in charge of that is General Kelly, who was in charge of the Southern Military Command in South America and in Central America, whose job is to train those military members of those countries who employ their force against civilian populations. What does that tell you, Michael? That's the guy that's coming up here to enforce the law against brown people.
Right. No, it's very scary. And if you look back at the history of the Border Patrol, it moved from the Immigration and Naturalization Services in the Clinton administration to after 9/11. We have George Bush moving it to the Department of Homeland Security, which takes it from sort of a civilian force to a military force who's in charge of welcoming, so to speak, our newly arrived immigrants. In addition to that, we see this two-pronged approach to immigration control, and that's military and the economy. We have several private industries who are invested in making sure that immigrants come, they stay, they take up our detention facilities, and those companies make a lot of money. The border security, the trucks aren't free, the infrared cameras aren't free, and all of the technologies that are used on the border, they profit somebody. And having those two things, having those two cards stacked against the immigrants coming from Central America or coming from Mexico is, it's treacherous. Those immigrants who are experiencing trauma in their own countries as a result of our imperialistic endeavors are coming here, and they're also being, exploited by our.
It's the ultimate militarization of the interior.
Yeah.
The militarization of the border has existed for a while. I'm going to ask, could you put number 9 on this? I want you to analyze this song from your public rhetoric PhD background.
Okay.
Because it's a Mexican-American song of Dr. Loco and the Rocking Jalapeno Band, a very progressive group out of Berkeley. For many years have been putting out, Pocho speak. Let's listen to this, and I want everybody's comment, because it deals with our question of identity.
From Chiapas to Chicago. From Tijuana.
So what do you think, Doc?
Well, I think it points to the fact that language matters. One of the things that I really appreciate about Spanglish is the fact that it doesn't have boundaries. It doesn't have borders around it. It's free flowing, just like we are, just like people are, and it points to the fact that there's power in not having a label. There's power in not being one thing or another thing, but being a couple of things at the same time. And I think for dreamers, for us living on the border, you mentioned like the difference between mojado and secado and everything in between. It's powerful to be without, a label.
What do you think, Senaida? What did you think of the song? Identify?
I love this song because I'm coming into my final semester and my project is really looking at identity within the border. Particularly analyzing a text by Cormac McCarthy that deals with border crossings and what that means for our identity. And it's something that I'm so heavily invested in because it is so difficult to grasp. On the one hand, you're told you're not good enough to be this. On the other one, you're also not good enough to be that. So where does that leave you? And I think it's what makes the border itself such an interesting place, because when people who don't live within the border think of the border, they think of these very strict binaries of this is them, this is us, and you can clearly tell the difference, when the reality is that the border is so blurred. There is such a mixture of culture here that for people who don't have those predefined identities, it's such an ideal place because it's the place where you don't have to define yourself. A semester ago or so, a couple of my colleagues and I were going out for lunch, and if you know it, in the UTEP campus, it's a very hill-like campus. So we were heading towards the garage, and the garage is facing Juarez. And you can get a clear picture of Juarez. And there were these visiting individuals who were being guided by a student. And the student pointed out, if you look over there, you can see Juarez. And immediately they turned around, they looked, and they were like, where is Juarez? I can't see Juarez. And, the student was like, it's right there. That's Juarez. When these individuals were clearly expecting something so drastically different from America that they could clearly say, oh, that's Juarez, when that's not the reality. It's so much more complicated than that. These strict binaries only work when on paper. They don't actually work in real life. Yes, on paper you can clearly say this is Mexico, this is America, but when you actually come to the border, you'll realize that it doesn't work that way. There isn't this clearly defined distinction of identity. You can be both at the same time.
Well, that raises the question of a political movement for the hiring of more Chicano migras. And that was a big debate during the Chicano movement and the pro-immigrant rights movements. Initially, it was a question of identity, and the question, you really were defining your politics based upon your perception of identity. The Chicanos were those who had made their decisions, que we're la India Maria con papeles. We're here. The gringos don't like us, the Mexicans don't like us, to hell with it, and we'll create our own entity. And so we want to be free. They structured their freedom. We want to be free as to who we are. But growing up in that era, is that many people didn't have many choices. And now it's still the same identity issue, and I think the song captures it very much. Pocho ya, pocho y qué. When I go speaking, I've got primos hermanos very involved, invested in academic work in Mexico City. She introduces me, and I introduce her as like Primo Pocho. Let's get it off the table. Even though I have dual national, I have my Mexican passport, I say, soy Pocho y qué. Okay, so now let's move on to the issues. But I think is that what we're seeing, and what I'm seeing that's different with the DACA kids, is that there's such a need politically and culturally to be accepted by your mother or your father here, that sometimes we forget about our mother. And most DACA kids, correct me if I'm wrong, speak about not wanting to go back to Mexico because they're from here, rather than addressing what Mexico is. In other words, I mean, very few say, I don't want to go back because 90% of all the homicides aren't even investigated, much less resolved, or because of the corruption, or because whether you accept me or not in this country, culturally, I'm a gringo, and I respect the rule of law, and there is no rule of law. You want me to go back to that? As opposed to, economic issues or some social issues of integration, or where am I gonna, how am I gonna realize my studies? So there's this question, I think, and one of the things I'd like to do, and I'm actually doing it with this discussion, is opening a debate or a discussion in terms of how do DACA kids view Mexico politically? Because the debate is here. And it's in the sense that framing of the issues does really make most DACA kids gringos, because it's very gringo. It says, that's over there. But I'm from there and I could end up there, yet I don't take a political stand or interest in what's happening in Mexico. And it's hell. The situation over there, I think, is pre-revolutionary. I follow this very, very closely. And so, which raises the issue that asylum can be a defense for Mexican kids here, if you're active. I'm not preaching to fix your papers that way or to go that way, but it's something that people should put on the table. What does it mean? Are you going to be persecuted if you go back? On what basis? You've been involved with the Border Network. Border Network has come out against repression in Mexico. You've been public about it. That's political opinion. That's a basis for asylum. It may not be a strong case, but people, when we start looking at Plan B, what happens if it's revoked and I have nothing to do? Do I have a defense against deportation? Have I been here 10 years? Am I going to get married? Am I going to commit fraud? So it raises all these questions of Plan B that we can save for another discussion. Any comments?
Well, I think what's also important, and going back to one of my earlier points, is that the way that we talk about dreamers, the way that we talk about Mexico, the way that we talk about each other really matters. And I think that one of the things that we see happening is sort of like you mentioned, we get this one-sided perspective of what life is like for Mexicans or Central Americans in their countries. And we oftentimes, we hear about their trauma, we hear about what they are going through, but we don't hear about them and their stories. And I think that's why this is important. Every person has a story, and every individual, deserves a chance. So we can share more stories, and by sharing those stories, we get more than just the one-sided view.
Exactly. How much time do we have? 6 minutes. Good. Now, let's talk about some of your ideas, Senaida, for organizing or making a call to DACA recipients or DACA family members that are interested in joining an organization. Who can they contact? What ideas do you guys have to recruit? I'm interested, for example, in having high school kids come to the program.
It's very difficult to approach because, like I mentioned earlier, we look just like everybody else. You can't single a person out and be like, oh, you're a DACA recipient. It's really hard to do recruitment, particularly because of the fear. So I think before we can actually take that step, we need to address that fear, and we need to find ways to encourage them to come out. We have this petition going on, that the Border Network plans to take up to Congress, and it's about signatures from DACA recipients. And I can't tell you how hard it has been for me to find those DACA recipients, just because they are so well integrated into the society that you can't really draw them out and say, please sign this. So for me, that's probably the biggest hurdle, is just getting them to separate themselves from that integrated society and admit that they're DACA recipients. So it's really, really hard to do that. Perhaps the biggest platform we probably have is Facebook at the moment. It's, social media, because it's very hard to do otherwise.
How about you, Dave?
Definitely. I really think that we all need to come together, and definitely I want everybody who's listening to know that if you are a DACA recipient, you're not alone. We are here to support each other and to have each other's backs. And, just like Senaida said, we need to come together on Facebook and have debates and discussions. There is 728,000 of us, and together we can make this movement a major movement. And we need to do it peacefully. We need to advocate for peaceful demonstrations. We need to look back at people like Martin Luther King, who did all these demonstrations and proved the point in such a successful way. And we need to shadow that. We need to take that as motivation, as a role model, and we need to do social movements in a peaceful way, because violence is not the way to go, and we need to come together, because that is the only way that our voices will be amplified, and that is the only way that our voices will be heard. And I just want to thank everybody again who supports our cause, because we will not let you down, and we will make America greater than it already is.
Great. 577-0750, 577-0750, through chat time, Facebook, streamlining, 577-0750. We have 2 minutes left, and if anybody has any calls, or if they want to an appointment with me at my office, is 544-0441, 544-0441. Your consultations here on the air are free. That should be an incentive. Trying to support the community, and any information you need and can't come to the office, call the program, and we'll be glad to deal with it. Now, have you guys organized any forums specifically on DACA at either El Paso Community College or UTEP, or is there a core group of DACA recipients that you know of?
I have stuck to the Border Network for Human Rights, and that's where we get together in groups, and we try to reach out to people in the community who are part of this situation, so that we can come together and make some noise and be noticed and heard.
Well, I ask you to invite your fellow members, your DACA recipients, and or their mothers as well, because it's important to hear from mom. How does she feel? Because I think that really what's important to do is kind of, when you're talking about we're integrated, it's kind of like saying, well, it's like being a Jew in Nazi Germany. Nobody's going around saying I'm a Jew. It's kind of like something you're trying to hide. And I get that. But the genius of this DACA movement was, what undocumented and proud, and that took a lot of guts. And so it really forced the issue, and to say, well, pick me up, do something, pick me up, but I'm here and I'm not going anywhere, and I'm going to fight to be with my family in the country that has adopted me, at least without papers, for the time being. 577-0750. This has been another edition of Through Chat Time. We ask you to listen and participate every Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 11 to 12. And I want to thank Michael Lechuga, David Gamez, and Senaida Navar for participating and for continuing to participate with us. We invite you to come back again. We invite you to bring others, get people used to talking and telling their story. And in the course of that, they will come to contribute and understand the necessity of us binding together in this loose-knit community of ours.
Thank you.
Hasta luego.
Muchas gracias, que Dios los bendiga a todos.
Como decía mi tía, I te watch you later.
Keep this movement going. Keep this movement rolling. In spite of the difficulties, and we're going to have a few more difficulties, keep climbing. Keep moving. If you can't fly, run. If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. But by all means, keep moving.